I am the famous American. Something I've learned in my 40 years on this planet is that you can look at a person's weaknesses, but on the extreme, that person's weaknesses may actually be their strengths, and vice versa. Here's a good thing about this person, well, then it becomes annoying in this, like for example, for me, I'm very stubborn and I always have been. Well, that seems negative, right? Well, what's the positive of that? Someone who's stubborn also is not the kind of person who is going to give in to peer pressure. I never knew what peer pressure was as a kid. I did whatever I wanted to do because I was so stubborn. And then, now as an adult, been married 13 years, I have a very steady job that I've committed to. I'm very loyal. I'm very committed. And I'm also very stubborn. So, let's take a look at this comment. I think it does a good job of pinpointing something about the United States of America. Heather K had this to say in a comment, quote, "It's your facial and body language openness that makes you appear American." And by American, we're specifically meaning from the United States of America. "Your frank honesty, Americans for better or worse are open books. We value vulnerability and connectedness as a polite social undercurrent. We are at our best helpful and honest, at our worst loud and obnoxious, but the goal is authenticity." Man, I love that comment. It's one of those things that, like, I'm aware as someone from the United States that the stereotype about us is that we're loud and annoying and obnoxious, which is funny because my last name is Schell, and in German that means loud ringing sound. So that's interesting. But I'm aware of the stereotype. But the paradox we live in is that so much of the rest of the world loves American culture. And you're watching our movies overseas and Western culture. It's so right there in all of our movies that you see. So how can at the same time think, those people sure are annoying, but then at the same time, oh, but they're cool. So it's one of those paradoxes. And I don't know if Heather K is from the United States or not, but I do love this. It helps me understand myself a little bit better and where I come from. But I taught overseas. I taught 2 summers in Thailand specifically and a little bit in South Korea. And I guess I can see this now as I'm hearing someone say it, that with my culture here from the United States, that I value being vulnerable and I value being connected, and ultimately in a sense of currency, that is a polite social undercurrent. By being open and honest, inquisitive, that's how I connect with people. And to me, that's being polite. And especially from the part of the United States I'm from, which is from the South, we're known for just starting conversations with people we don't know and smiling and waving and holding doors for people. Like, that's what we're known for. It's politeness to be talkative. It's politeness to start a conversation with someone. That's being polite. And if we can be open about ourselves in the process, we can have the other person hopefully open up and feel connected. So that's apparently part of our culture. I can't speak for all the United States, but for me, in my social circles, my life as I know it, that's the general observation that definitely seems to be true, and I didn't realize that. Now, here's the downfall of that, especially on the internet, is that when you start talking about general things, or even talking about yourself, or talking about anything that you're even thinking out loud, that people will get their tomatoes ready to throw at you. And what do they love to do on the internet? They love to say that you're at least one of the 3 following things. You are wrong. You are ignorant. You are immoral. People love to do that. And I guess that's just part of, as the saying goes, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. That's part of it. I understand that I am being vulnerable by talking about all the things that I talk about. Not so much in this video, but in other ones that I'm about to film, I'm sure. But I'm willing to be condemned by my critics, by my viewers. I'm okay with that, whether it's on YouTube or in real life. I don't always have to be right. In fact, one of my life philosophies is I always assume I'm wrong at least half the time, because it would be completely egocentric of me to assume that I'm not wrong at least half the time. I'm always learning. I'm always looking back at myself from a year ago or 5 years ago or a decade ago thinking, that's what I used to believe? Oh man, that's embarrassing. I said that? Oh boy, and I can easily do that with these videos here. But I think that by making these videos and asking the questions that I do and observing the generalizations that I do without fear, a lot of people fear generalizations. I don't. I think we can learn a lot from them. And I think when people avoid generalizations, it's ultimately survivorship bias, which is the logical error of concentrating on the people or things that made it past some selection process and overlooking those that did not. I think it's interesting that we look at the general rules, and I'm not afraid to be criticized for that because I'm being honest and I'm being open, and that's my way of connecting with people. It makes me wonder too, this idea that Americans value being honest and vulnerable, it makes me wonder if that's part of what makes this channel fascinating to so many people in other parts of the world. Because as I look at my viewership on this channel, it's largely not people in the United States. I mean, even if half of the people are, I've got a lot of people in Spain specifically. I've got a lot of people in the Philippines specifically. So that's interesting. There's something to be valued even about the culture that I provide in these videos. Thank you so much for that comment. I love it. Let's talk more about it right here in the comments.